The sleek private jet sat gleaming on the tarmac, its silver body reflecting the golden rays of the late afternoon sun. Camille Jackson, a 32-year-old tech billionaire and CEO of one of the world's fastest-growing AI companies, approached the plane with her assistant Miles trailing behind her. Camille, dressed in a tailored navy pantsuit and minimalist heels, exuded an aura of power and precision. She preferred working in the shadows, letting her achievements speak louder than her presence. Few outside the tech world even knew who she was, exactly the way she liked it. But before we dive into what happens next, I'd love to know, where are you tuning in from today? Drop a comment below. Camille's private jet, her haven during her countless business trips, had been prepped for a flight to Singapore for a high-stakes negotiation. It was her creation, the AI-driven systems powering global industries, that had made her a billionaire before 30. But for all her accomplishments, Camille had always faced one unchanging reality: being underestimated and dismissed because of her race and gender. She approached the stairs leading to the jet, ready to board, but the crew at the base of the plane stopped her. A tall, blonde flight attendant stepped forward, her expression cold and calculating. "Excuse me, ma'am," she said, blocking Camille's path. "This jet is reserved for our client. You're not allowed to board." Camille raised an eyebrow, her composure unshaken. "I am the client. This is my jet." The flight attendant exchanged a glance with the co-pilot standing nearby, both of them smirking. "Right," the woman said with an exaggerated nod. "You'll need to step back. We can't allow just anyone to board. You're clearly mistaken." Miles, who had been silently watching the interaction, took a step forward. "This is Miss Camille Jackson," he said firmly. "She owns this jet, and you're talking to one of the most powerful women in the world." The flight attendant's demeanor didn't change. Instead, she crossed her arms and sneered. "Listen, sweetie," she said to Camille. "I don't know what scam you're trying to pull, but I don't care how much you think you belong here. You don't." Camille's eyes narrowed, but she remained calm. She pulled out her phone, dialing the head of her private aviation company. Within seconds, her call was answered. "James," she said in her cool, measured tone, "it seems there's been a misunderstanding. Your crew doesn't seem to realize I'm their employer. I'd appreciate it if you cleared that up." The flight attendant's smirk faltered as Camille handed her phone over. On the other end of the line, James's voice was loud and unmistakably furious. The flight attendant's face turned pale as she listened. She handed the phone back to Camille with trembling hands, stammering, I didn't realize. I'm so sorry, Miss Jackson." Camille stared at her, her expression unreadable. "You didn't realize because you didn't want to," she said quietly. "You saw me, and you made your assumptions. That's a reflection of you, not me." The flight crew stood frozen as Camille turned to Miles. "Get James back on the line. I want every member of this crew replaced by the time we land in Singapore. Effective immediately." "Of course, Miss Jackson," Miles said, already dialing. The stunned crew began pleading with her, their arrogance replaced with desperation. But Camille didn't engage further. She climbed the stairs to her jet, her heels clicking against the metal, and disappeared inside. Once seated, she took a deep breath and looked out the window as the plane taxied down the runway. She thought about all the times she'd been dismissed, doubted, or disrespected. Each time she had risen above, proving that her value couldn't be diminished by someone else's ignorance. As the jet lifted into the sky, Camille leaned back in her seat, pulling out her laptop to prepare for the negotiation ahead. She didn't need to announce her power or demand recognition. Her actions, swift, decisive, and unapologetic, spoke louder than words ever could. By the time she landed in Singapore, James had already emailed her to confirm the new crew had been hired. And as news of the incident leaked to the media, despite Camille's usual preference for staying out of the spotlight, the story became a viral sensation. The headlines weren't just about a billionaire firing a crew. They were about a black woman reclaiming her power in a world that often tried to strip it away. For Camille, it was just another day. But for countless others, her story became a reminder that strength isn't about raising your voice. It's about knowing your worth and refusing to let anyone take it away. The private jet cut through the skies with precision, its interior a cocoon of luxury and calm. Camille Jackson sat in her usual seat by the window, the hum of the engines a soothing backdrop, as she opened her laptop to review the details of the Singapore deal. Miles, seated across from her, busily tapped away on his tablet, coordinating the replacement crew and ensuring the incident from earlier didn't disrupt the meticulously planned schedule. But Camille couldn't shake the encounter on the tarmac. She prided herself on her composure, her ability to stay calm under pressure. But there was something about the flight crew's blatant disrespect that lingered. It wasn't the first time she had been judged by the color of her skin or dismissed because she didn't fit someone's stereotype of a billionaire CEO. She had dealt with this her entire life, through college while raising seed capital for her startup, even as her company began breaking revenue records. Back then, investors had doubted her abilities, even as she presented flawless business plans. Many of them, all white men, had refused to take her seriously. They would ask to speak to her boss, not realizing she was the one in charge. She had learned to let her results speak for themselves. And now, as one of the youngest self-made billionaires, her success was undeniable. Still, moments like this reminded her that no amount of wealth or influence could completely shield her from prejudice. Camille looked up from her laptop and glanced at Miles, who was typing furiously. "How are we doing on replacements?" she asked. "James is on it," he replied. "The new crew will be ready for your return flight. Background checks are being expedited and he's making sure this won't happen again." Camille nodded, satisfied. "Good. And make sure the dismissed crew is blacklisted from working with our aviation partners. If they can't respect the people they serve, they don't deserve the privilege of this work." Miles hesitated, looking like he wanted to say something. "What?" Camille asked, setting her laptop aside. "You've been dealing with this kind of thing for years," he said carefully. "You never let it show, but doesn't it get to you?" Camille leaned back in her seat, her gaze drifting to the clouds outside the window. "Of course it does," she said after a pause. "I'm human. It hurts to be dismissed, to be made to feel like I don't belong in spaces I worked hard to reach. But I learned a long time ago that I can't let every insult or slight derail me. The world isn't fair, and if I waited for fairness, I'd still be sitting in someone else's office, working for someone who didn't value me." Miles nodded, absorbing her words. He had worked for Camille for 5 years and admired her strength and resilience, but seeing her face, the disrespect she had earlier, made him realize just how much she had to endure to maintain her success. As the flight continued, Camille returned to her work, but the memory of the interaction on the tarmac refused to fade. She decided she would do something more about it, not just for herself, but for others who faced similar indignities. By the time Camille landed in Singapore, she had already put a plan in motion. After her meeting with the clients, where she effortlessly closed a multi-million-dollar deal, she scheduled a call with her PR team. "I want to make a statement," she told them. "We need to address what happened with the flight crew, but I don't want it to be just about me. This is about a systemic issue." Her PR manager, Vanessa, listened intently. "You're thinking about taking this public?" "Yes," Camille said firmly. "We'll share the story, but it's not about shaming the crew. It's about highlighting how these biases still exist, even at the highest levels. I also want to launch an initiative, something that supports minority professionals in the aviation industry. Pilots, crew members, technicians, anyone who's been held back because of who they are." Vanessa's eyes lit up. "That's brilliant. We can position it as a call to action, showing that even someone in your position isn't immune to discrimination, but is actively working to change the narrative." Camille nodded. "Exactly. And while we're at it, let's make sure our hiring practices across all divisions reflect our values. I want every manager trained on unconscious bias and diversity. No exceptions." Within days, Camille's story went viral. Major media outlets picked up the headline, "Tech billionaire denied boarding her own Jetfire's racist crew and takes action." But Camille's focus wasn't on the sensationalism, it was on the ripple effect. Her initiative, named Wings of Equity, quickly gained traction, securing partnerships with airlines and aviation schools to provide scholarships and mentorship programs for underrepresented individuals in the industry. The public response was overwhelming. Social media lit up with messages of support, from young girls who dreamed of flying planes to seasoned professionals who had faced their own share of discrimination. Camille's inbox was flooded with letters of gratitude and stories from people who had been inspired by her actions. As for the former crew, they disappeared from the aviation world, their behavior a cautionary tale. Months later, Camille sat in her office overlooking the city skyline. She had just received an update on Asterisk Wings of Equity. Over 500 scholarships had been awarded in its first quarter alone. A small smile played on her lips. She knew she couldn't change the world overnight, but this was a start. And as long as she had the power and platform to make a difference, she would keep fighting. Not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever been told they didn't belong. Drop a comment if you enjoyed this story. It doesn't cost you anything and you'll make me very happy. Thank you, and I look forward to your like.